deep within the ancient folds of Appalachia, where misty peaks guard forgotten secrets, the promise of rustic retreat can curdle into primal fear. Welcome, seekers of the wild and the unsettling, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight, we unlock the doors to 4 true cabin horror stories, where isolation becomes a terrifying accomplice. What whispers have you heard carried on the mountain wind? What unseen eyes have you felt from the tree line? The comments below await your own tales of wilderness dread. If the chilling authenticity of these remote terrors draws you in, consider this your invitation to subscribe, for the narratives we've unearthed from these lonely cabins are particularly potent. And the final, most disquieting revelation is a twist you'll need to witness to truly grasp the horror. The silence hit me first, not the peaceful quiet I'd expected from a remote mountain cabin, but something wrong, heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I rolled over in the unfamiliar bed, my internal clock reading around 6 a.m., and found Jessica already awake beside me, her green eyes wide with the same unease I felt. Outside, the West Virginia wilderness stretched endlessly, shrouded in morning mist that should have been beautiful, but somehow felt ominous. That's when I heard it, a sharp crack echoing through the valley, unmistakably a rifle shot, then another. Jessica's hand found mine under the covers, her fingers ice cold, despite the warm blankets. We'd driven 4 hours from Richmond yesterday for this romantic weekend getaway, choosing this secluded cabin specifically for its privacy and peace. The rental listing had promised complete isolation and exclusive access to pristine wilderness. But as more gunshots echoed off the mountain ridges, I wondered if we were truly alone. What were they hunting at this hour? And why did every instinct scream that we were being watched? I'm David Chen, a 34-year-old software engineer, and this was supposed to be the perfect surprise for Jessica's birthday. She's a marathon runner, a veterinarian with nerves of steel, but I could feel her trembling as we listened to the distant sounds. We booked through a legitimate rental app, paid good money for this exclusive retreat. I had the confirmation printed and everything just to be safe. The morning light revealed our first real sign of trouble. Our Honda Civic sat in the gravel driveway with all 4 tires slashed. Not randomly vandalized, but surgically destroyed with clean, deliberate cuts. The rubber hung in ribbons from the rims like some twisted art installation. Jesus Christ, Jessica whispered, stepping back instinctively. Before I could process what this meant, voices called out from the tree line. You'll need to come out here and have a talk. 3 men emerged from the forest with military precision, spreading into a loose semicircle around us. All were hunting camouflage and carried rifles with the casual confidence of people who'd used them before. The leader was tall and lean, maybe 50, with graying hair and pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of our appearance. Name's Earl Hutchins, he said, his Appalachian drawl carrying an undertone of authority. This here's private hunting land. You folks are trespassing. I pulled out my phone, showing him our rental confirmation. We have a legal agreement. We paid for exclusive access through Sunday. Earl barely glanced at the screen. Don't matter what some app says. This land's been in our family for generations. You're interfering with our hunt. The way he said hunt made my skin crawl. One of his companions, younger, with dead eyes and prison tattoos creeping up his neck, kept staring at Jessica in a way that made me want to step between them. Look, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. We'll leave as soon as we can get our car fixed. Can you recommend a tow service? Earl's smile was thin and predatory. Cell service is real spotty up here. Might take a while to get help. Meanwhile, you folks best stay inside, for your own safety. It wasn't a suggestion. As the morning progressed, they positioned themselves around our cabin like sentries. I counted at least 6 different figures moving through the woods, all armed, all watching. They weren't hiding. They wanted us to see them, to understand we were surrounded. Inside the cabin, Jessica found something that made our situation horrifyingly clear. Hidden in the tourist brochures on the kitchen counter was a manila folder containing dozens of photographs. Different couples at the same cabin, all young and attractive, all taken with telephoto lenses without their knowledge. At the bottom was a handwritten list of names and dates going back 3 years. Next to each name, collected, David. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. We're not the first. That's when Earl walked through our back door without knocking, rifle in hand, like he owned the place. Which I realized with growing horror. He probably did. Found our hunting records, did you? He said, noticing the open folder. Been running this operation quite a while. Started as extra income off family land, but evolved into something more specialized. The other men filed in behind him, weapons trained on us with casual menace. Earl settled into a chair like he planned to stay. See, city folks like you come up here thinking you can buy your way into our world. Pay your money, take your pictures, go home with cute stories about roughing it, but you never understand what it means to be prey. What do you want? I asked, though the answer was becoming terrifyingly clear. Entertainment, Earl said simply. Most dangerous game, as they say. You run, we hunt. Been doing it for years. Got buyers who pay premium prices for live footage. Amazing what people will pay to watch real fear. Jessica's grip on my hand tightened. You're insane. Maybe, but we're professionals. Got a network of fake rentals across 3 states. Police think missing hikers just got lost. Amazing how many city folks disappear in these mountains. As darkness fell, they began their preparations. Spotlights appeared in the forest, creating a perimeter of harsh white light. I could hear dogs barking in the distance, bloodhounds from the deep baying sound. They were turning this into a professional hunt. Here's how it works, Earl explained, checking his rifle. 2-hour head start. Make it 8 miles to the main road. You're free. We'll even give you a ride to town. But if we catch you, his smile revealed something inhuman. Well, our clients expect a good show. At 10 p.m., they cut the power and opened the front door. Time to run. We bolted into the darkness, crashing through underbrush with no idea where we were going. Behind us, their laughter echoed through the forest like predator calls. The head start wouldn't last long. The forest was a nightmare maze of fallen logs and thorny thickets that tore at our clothes. Jessica's marathon training helped, but the terrain was treacherous in complete darkness. We stumbled repeatedly, each crash seeming to echo like a dinner bell. After 30 minutes, we heard the first howl. They'd released the dogs. We found a creek just as the baying grew closer. The water was shockingly cold, but we waded upstream, hoping to break our scent trail. Spotlights began sweeping through the trees behind us, and I could hear the men coordinating through radios. Got movement near the North Ridge. Dogs have the scent. A rifle shot cracked overhead, splintering a branch inches from my head. They weren't trying to kill us. Not yet. This was part of the game, the fear they were selling to their online audience. We crawled out of the creek near a dirt road, hypothermic but alive. A state trooper's cruiser appeared like salvation, its driver taking one look at our condition and immediately calling for backup. The investigation revealed the full scope of Earl's operation. He'd been running fake rental properties for over 5 years, luring couples into his preserve. 17 people were confirmed missing, their disappearances previously attributed to hiking accidents. The FBI found servers containing hours of footage sold on dark web platforms to clients who paid thousands to watch real people hunted like animals. Earl and his crew were arrested, but the trial revealed disturbing details about their network. They'd been selling murder as entertainment, turning isolated cabins across Appalachia into killing grounds for wealthy sadists. Jessica and I survived, but the experience shattered something fundamental in us. We moved cities, changed our routines, went through months of therapy. Every unexpected sound still sends adrenaline flooding through my system. The wilderness, once a source of peace, now feels like a place where monsters wear human faces. The rental listing is probably still online somewhere, waiting for the next unsuspecting couple to book their romantic getaway. Because the most terrifying truth I learned is that some people don't see other humans as fellow beings. They see us as content, as products to be consumed by an audience hungry for authentic terror. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear Earl's voice echoing through my dreams. Time to run, because somewhere out there, another hunting ground is being prepared. Another couple is booking what they think will be the perfect weekend escape, never knowing they're walking into a trap where their fear becomes someone else's entertainment. And here you go. Compared fear becomes someone else's entertainment. Pine needles crunched under my hiking boots as I approached the weathered log cabin that would be my home for the next week. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of Blue Ridge Mountains forest, casting dancing shadows across the cabin's wrap-around porch. Everything felt perfect. Exactly the kind of isolated retreat I'd been craving after months of city stress and a brutal divorce settlement. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping sound from somewhere behind the cabin, like metal dragging across wood. I paused on the porch steps, keys in hand, listening. The mountains were supposed to be full of wildlife, I told myself. Probably just a raccoon or possum exploring the property. But as I unlocked the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the tree line, studying my arrival with the patience of a predator who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm a 34-year-old graphic designer from Charlotte. It was October 2023, and I booked this cabin through a vacation rental website, desperate for a week of solitude to work on my freelance portfolio and clear my head after the divorce. The listing had promised complete privacy and caretaker, available for emergencies only, which sounded perfect for someone who just wanted to disappear for a while. The cabin sat on 40 acres of private forest land, accessible only by a winding dirt road that took 20 minutes to navigate from the nearest highway. Cell service was spotty at best, and the closest neighbor was miles away. For someone seeking isolation, it was paradise. For someone in danger, it would be a tomb. I'd barely finished unpacking when Harold Brennan appeared at my door. The caretaker looked to be in his 60s, with weathered hands and sharp gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about me. My height, my clothes, whether I was wearing a wedding ring. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone who spent most of his time alone, watching and thinking. Just wanted to make sure you got settled. Okay, he said, but his gaze kept drifting past me into the cabin's interior. You planning to be here all week? By yourself? The questions felt too personal, too probing. I gave him vague answers about my schedule and thanked him for checking on me. But he lingered on the porch longer than necessary, asking about my work, my car, whether anyone knew exactly where I was staying. These mountains can be dangerous for a woman alone, he said finally. Lots of places to get lost, lots of ways to get hurt. Good thing I'm just down the hill if you need anything. That first night, I cooked dinner and tried to settle into the cabin's rustic charm. But as darkness fell, the isolation that had seemed peaceful began to feel oppressive. The forest sounds, owl calls, rustling leaves, the distant crack of breaking branches, seemed louder and more ominous than they should have. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate steps that circled the cabin methodically, pausing at each window. I lay frozen in bed, listening as the footsteps approached my bedroom window and stopped. For maybe 10 minutes there was complete silence. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away from the cabin and disappearing into the forest. In the morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream, or maybe a large animal exploring the property. But when I stepped outside to get firewood, I saw them, fresh boot prints in the soft mud around the cabin's foundation. Size 11 or 12, with a distinctive tread pattern that looked like work boots. The prints circled the entire cabin, but they clustered most heavily around my bedroom window and the bathroom. Someone had been walking the perimeter of the building, stopping to look inside, studying the interior layout and my sleeping habits. I called Harold's number, but it went straight to voicemail. When he finally appeared around noon, I showed him the footprints. His reaction was too casual, too practiced. Probably just hunters passing through, he said, but he avoided making eye contact. I'll ask around, see if anyone's been trespassing. But I caught him studying the prints with professional interest, like he was examining his own handiwork. That afternoon, I drove into town for supplies, hoping to get better cell service and maybe contact local authorities about the incident. But the nearest sheriff's station was closed for the weekend, and the general store clerk just shrugged when I mentioned Harold. Old Harold. He's been taking care of those rental cabins for 15 years. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's harmless enough. On the drive back, I noticed Harold's pickup truck, parked at a scenic overlook about halfway up the mountain. He was sitting in the cab with binoculars, watching the road below. When he saw my car, he started his engine and drove away quickly. But not before I'd gotten a clear look at what was spread across his passenger seat. Photographs, dozens of them, scattered across the seat and dashboard like a dealer's hand of playing cards. That night, I made sure all the windows were locked and drew the curtains tight, but around 2 a.m. I heard them again. The footsteps circling the cabin, more confident now, less concerned about being detected. This time I crept to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. Harold stood maybe 20 feet from the cabin, pointing a camera with a long telephoto lens directly at my bedroom window. He was wearing dark clothing and moved with the practiced stealth of someone who'd done this many times before. I watched him work his way around the building, stopping at each window to take photographs, occasionally adjusting his position for better angles. When he reached the bathroom window, he spent several minutes setting up his shot, waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity. This wasn't random trespassing. This was systematic stalking, and I was probably not his first victim. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal when Harold came by to check on me. But I was studying him now, noting details I'd missed before. His clothes were clean, despite supposedly working outdoors. His truck was parked at a different angle, positioned for a quick escape. Most telling, he kept glancing at my bedroom window with the satisfied expression of someone reviewing private memories. "Sleep well?" he asked, and the way he said it made my skin crawl. "Fine," I replied, though I thought I heard some animals outside. "Yeah, lots of wildlife around here. You should be more careful about closing your curtains at night. You should be more careful about closing your curtains at night. Never know what might be watching." The threat was barely veiled. He wanted me to know he'd been watching, wanted to see my reaction, to feed off my fear and discomfort. After he left, I searched his truck. The door was unlocked, and what I found in the glove compartment made my blood run cold. A manila envelope filled with photographs, dozens of them, dating back years, showing women in various states of undress inside what appeared to be the same cabin I was staying in. Some were taken through windows while the women slept. Others caught them showering or changing clothes. A few showed women who appeared to be unconscious or drugged, posed in ways that suggested Harold had gained access to the interior. At the bottom of the stack, I found driver's licenses. Sarah Chen, 28, from Atlanta. Missing since 2019. Jessica Rodriguez, 31, from Raleigh. Missing since 2020. 5 different women, all roughly my age and appearance. All last seen traveling alone to remote vacation rentals in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Harold wasn't just a voyeuristic stalker. He was collecting trophies from women who'd never made it home. I grabbed the evidence and ran back to the cabin, but my car keys weren't where I'd left them. Harold had taken them while I was searching his truck, trapping me 20 miles from civilization with no way to call for help and no escape route except on foot, through terrain he knew intimately. That's when I heard his voice from the tree line. "Looking for something, Sarah." He emerged from the forest carrying a rifle and my car keys, no longer bothering to hide his intentions. His whole demeanor had changed. The helpful caretaker mask was gone, replaced by something cold and predatory. "You shouldn't have gone through my things," he said calmly. "I was planning to wait a few more days, let you get comfortable, but you forced my hand." I backed toward the cabin, but he just shook his head. "Don't bother. I have keys to every door, know every hiding place. You can run into the mountains if you want, but I've been hunting these woods for 40 years. I'll find you before you make it a mile." The photographs scattered from my hands as I stumbled backward. Those women, what did you do to them? Gave them a different kind of vacation than they expected. Some were more cooperative than others. His smile was reptilian, completely devoid of humanity. "You'll be cooperative, won't you, Sarah? It makes things easier for everyone." "Sarah, it makes things easier for everyone." I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush toward what I hoped was the direction of the main road. Behind me, Harold's laughter echoed through the trees, unhurried and confident. He knew these mountains like his own backyard, and I was running blind through terrain that became his accomplice. But as I stumbled through a creek bed, I remembered something from the rental listing. The property bordered a national forest, which meant there might be hiking trails marked with blazes that could lead me to ranger stations or public campgrounds. I found the trail markers just as Harold's voice called out from maybe 100 yards behind me. "Getting tired yet, Sarah? I've got all day." The trail led downhill toward what looked like a main hiking path. If I could reach it, there might be other hikers. People who could help or at least witness what happened to me. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. Branches tearing at my clothes and face, lungs burning in the thin mountain air. Behind me, Harold's pursuit was methodical, patient. He wasn't trying to catch me quickly. He was hurting me, driving me deeper into the wilderness where my screams would never be heard. But the main trail was closer than I'd thought. I burst onto the wide, well-maintained path and immediately saw them. A group of college students with backpacks and camping gear, taking a break at a scenic overlook. "Help!" I screamed, stumbling toward them. "There's a man with a gun." Harold emerged from the tree line behind me, but when he saw the witnesses, he stopped. The helpful caretaker mask slipped back into place, and he lowered the rifle. "Sorry about the scare," he called to the hikers. "We were doing some target practice, and she got spooked by the noise." But the college students weren't buying it. Something in my appearance, the terror in my eyes, the scratches on my face, the evidence of desperate flight, told them this wasn't target practice. One of them had already pulled out a satellite phone and was calling for help. Harold realized his hunt was over. He melted back into the forest like smoke, leaving behind his rifle and decades of carefully hidden evidence. By the time park rangers and sheriff's deputies reached the scene, he'd vanished into the mountains he knew better than anyone. The investigation revealed the full scope of Harold's activities. The cabin I'd rented was one of 7 properties he maintained across 3 states, all catering to solo female travelers seeking isolated retreats. His photography collection contained evidence of crimes spanning 20 years, with at least 15 women confirmed missing or dead. Harold Brennan was never caught. The manhunt lasted for months, but he'd simply evaporated into the wilderness, probably living off supplies he'd cached throughout the mountains over decades of preparation. I testified at multiple hearings and helped identify victims from his photograph collection, but I could never fully explain the horror of realizing I'd been selected, studied, and hunted by someone who turned women's desire for peace and solitude into their death sentence. 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a camera memory card containing photos of me taken during my escape, running through the forest, stumbling down the trail, screaming for help at the overlook. The final image showed me giving my statement to park rangers, with a telephoto shot taken from deep in the forest. At the bottom, someone had scratched a message into the camera's casing. "Still watching, Sarah. Still learning," because some predators never stop hunting. They just adapt their methods, find new territories, and wait for the next victim who thinks she's found the perfect place to disappear. And somewhere in those Blue Ridge Mountains, Harold Brennan is still out there, maintaining his cabins, studying his next targets, and adding new photographs to his collection. The only question is, when you book that perfect isolated retreat, who's really watching you through the cabin windows? The key turned easily in the lock of Maple Ridge cabin, and I stepped into what should have been my perfect week-long escape from Nashville's suffocating summer heat. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating rustic pine furniture and a stone fireplace that promised cozy evenings in the Tennessee mountains. The rental listing had promised complete privacy and no distractions, exactly what I needed after months of corporate deadlines and relationship stress. That's when I heard it, a soft thud from somewhere upstairs, like something heavy dropping to the floor. I paused in the doorway, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. Old cabin settling, I told myself. Though something about the deliberate nature of that thud made my skin prickle with unease. As I carried my suitcase to the master bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching my arrival from the dense forests surrounding the property, studying my movements with the patience of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. My name is Rachel Torres, and I'm a 31-year-old marketing manager who'd booked this cabin through a vacation rental app for the first week of September 2023. After a brutal breakup and a work project that had consumed my entire summer, I was desperate for solitude in the Smoky Mountains, somewhere I could disconnect from civilization and remember who I was before my life became consumed by other people's expectations. The cabin sat on 5 acres of wooded property, accessible only by a narrow gravel road that wound through thick forest for almost 2 miles from the main highway. Cell service was practically non-existent, and the nearest neighbor was invisible through the trees. For someone seeking isolation, it was paradise. But paradise had secrets. The first suspicious sign came when I was unpacking in the bedroom. Tucked behind the nightstand, I found a small bottle of prescription medication, Xanax, prescribed to someone named Jennifer Walsh. The bottle was nearly full, and the prescription date was less than a month old. Strange thing to leave behind, especially anxiety medication. In the bathroom, wedged between the vanity and the wall, I discovered a hair elastic with long blonde strands still tangled in it. My hair is dark brown and short. Someone else had been here recently. Someone who'd left in enough of a hurry to abandon personal items. I called the rental management company, but the customer service representative seemed confused by my questions. "Man, you're our first guest at that property this season. The cabin's been empty since March for renovations, but there were no signs of recent construction work, and the personal items I'd found looked fresh, not like they'd been sitting there for months." That evening, while exploring the cabin's storage areas, I made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet was a small leather journal, the kind used for personal diary entries. The cover was worn smooth by frequent handling, and when I opened it, I saw neat feminine handwriting dated just 3 weeks earlier. The first entry was cheerful. "Finally made it to the cabin. Exactly what I needed after the divorce. So peaceful here, so quiet. Perfect place to heal." But as I read further, the tone grew increasingly anxious. Jennifer Walsh, the same name from the prescription bottle, had documented a growing sense of being watched, of finding things moved in the cabin when she returned from hikes, of hearing footsteps on the porch at night. The entries became more frantic. "Someone's been in the cabin while I was out. My clothes were arranged differently. Food missing from the refrigerator. Called the rental company, but they insist I'm the only guest." My hands shook as I read the final entry, dated exactly 2 weeks before my arrival. "They're getting bolder. Found muddy footprints on the bedroom floor this morning. Whoever it is has been inside, watching me sleep. I can feel eyes on me constantly now. The isolation I thought would heal me has become a trap. I hear them coming up the entry ended mid-sentence, as if Jennifer had been interrupted while writing. The pen had dragged across the page, leaving a jagged line where her hand had been yanked away from the journal. I called the rental company again, demanding to know what had happened to Jennifer Walsh, but the same representative insisted they had no record of anyone by that name ever booking the property. "Ma'am, you're our first guest this season. If you're finding personal items, they probably belong to the property owners or maintenance staff." But I'd found Jennifer's driver's license tucked in the journal's back cover. Jennifer Walsh, 29, from Memphis. The photo showed a pretty blonde woman with the same hair color as the strands I'd found in the bathroom. According to her license, Jennifer should have returned to Memphis 2 weeks ago, but her car wasn't at the cabin. Her belongings were still hidden throughout the property, and the rental company claimed she'd never existed. That night, I read through Jennifer's journal again, noting how her handwriting became more erratic with each entry, how her descriptions of being watched matched exactly what I was starting to feel. The same sense of invisible eyes tracking my movements, the same feeling that the forest around the cabin held threats I couldn't identify. Around 2 a.m., I heard them, slow, deliberate footsteps on the cabin's wraparound porch, just as Jennifer had described. The steps circled the building methodically, pausing at each window as if someone was peering inside, studying the interior layout and occupant. I crept to the living room window and peered through the curtains. In the moonlight, I could see boot prints in the soft earth around the cabin's foundation. Fresh prints that hadn't been there when I'd arrived that afternoon. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom window, and I could hear breathing, slow and controlled, like someone trying to hear what was happening inside. For maybe 10 minutes, whoever was out there remained perfectly still, just listening. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away from the cabin and disappearing into the forest. The next morning, I found more evidence of Jennifer's presence and her terror. Hidden in the kitchen pantry was a cell phone with a cracked screen. the battery long dead. When I managed to charge it using my cable, I discovered dozens of photos Jennifer had taken of the surrounding forest, trying to document whoever was stalking her. Most of the photos showed nothing but trees and shadows, but in several I could make out a figure in the background. Someone in dark clothing watching the cabin from a distance, always just far enough away to remain unidentifiable. The final photos were taken from inside the cabin, showing muddy boot prints on the kitchen floor, items moved from their original positions, and what looked like scratches on the bedroom door frame, as if someone had been trying to force the lock. I tried calling the local sheriff's office, but my phone had no signal. The landline phone in the cabin had been disconnected, the cord cut cleanly, as if with a knife. Whoever was out there didn't want me communicating with the outside world. That afternoon, I decided to hike to the main road and flag down help. But as I prepared to leave, I found fresh tire tracks in the gravel driveway. Tracks that hadn't been there when I'd arrived. Someone had been here while I was inside the cabin, close enough to touch my car. Under my windshield wiper was a note written in block letters. Jennifer thought she could leave too. She was wrong. I ran back to the cabin and barricaded myself inside, pushing furniture against the doors and windows. As darkness fell, I could hear movement in the forest around the property. Not the random sounds of wildlife, but the deliberate positioning of someone preparing for a coordinated approach. The footsteps on the porch started earlier this time, around sunset, but now they were joined by other sounds. The soft scraping of metal against wood, like someone testing the strength of door frames and window locks, testing the barriers between hunter and prey. Through the bedroom window, I saw him clearly for the first time. A man in his 40s, wearing hunting camouflage, and carrying what looked like a camera with a telephoto lens. He moved around the cabin with practiced ease, photographing me through the windows, documenting my fear like he documented Jennifer's. But he wasn't alone. I could see other figures moving through the tree line. At least 2 more people, coordinating their positions, surrounding the cabin systematically. This wasn't the work of a single stalker. This was an organized operation, and I was the latest target in what appeared to be a pattern of abducting women from remote vacation rentals. They wanted me to know they were there, wanted me to experience the same escalating terror that Jennifer had documented in her journal. The psychological torture was part of their process, breaking down their victims' resistance before moving to the physical phase. Around midnight, they made their move. I heard the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen, followed by the creak of the back door opening slowly. They were inside. I grabbed Jennifer's journal and crawled under the bed, hoping the darkness would hide me long enough to... What? There was nowhere to run. No way to call for help. No escape from people who knew these mountains intimately, and had planned this operation carefully. Footsteps moved through the cabin methodically, searching each room. When they reached the bedroom, I could see boots stopping just inches from my hiding place. A flashlight beam swept under the bed, illuminating my terrified face. Found her, a voice said calmly. Hands dragged me out from under the bed, and I found myself face to face with 3 men in hunting gear. The leader was the man I'd seen through the window, and he held a camera in one hand and a syringe in the other. Rachel Torres, he said, reading from what looked like a printed email confirmation. Marketing manager from Nashville. No immediate family, no close friends expecting regular contact. Perfect candidate for our program. What did you do to Jennifer? I gasped. He smiled, pulling out his phone to show me a series of photographs. Jennifer Walsh, bound and terrified, in what looked like an underground bunker or basement. The images were time-stamped. The most recent was from yesterday. Jennifer's helping us perfect our methods. You'll be joining her soon, but first we need to document your fear response. Our clients pay premium prices for authentic terror. They were making snuff films, using isolated vacation rentals to identify and abduct victims who wouldn't be missed immediately. The rental company was probably in on it, providing guest information and scheduling access. As they prepared the syringe, I heard something that changed everything. Sirens in the distance, growing louder. Someone had found my car at the main road, or maybe a concerned friend had reported me missing when I didn't return calls. The men exchanged quick glances, then the leader made a decision. We take her now, clean up later. But as they dragged me toward the door, the cabin was suddenly flooded with light. Sheriff's deputies surrounded the building, shouting commands through megaphones. In the chaos that followed, I managed to break free and run toward the police lights. Two of the men were arrested immediately, but the leader disappeared into the forest, vanishing like smoke into terrain he'd been using as a hunting ground for years. The investigation revealed that Jennifer Walsh and at least 6 other women had been abducted from remote vacation rentals across Tennessee and Kentucky. The operation had been running for 3 years, using fake rental companies and compromised booking platforms to identify isolated female travelers. Jennifer was found alive in an underground facility 20 miles from the cabin, traumatized but surviving. The other victims weren't as fortunate. The leader, identified as Marcus Ride, a former military contractor, was never caught. He prepared multiple escape routes and supply caches throughout the Appalachian wilderness, and he simply evaporated into the mountains he'd been using as his private hunting preserve. 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a camera memory card containing hundreds of photos, images of me at the cabin, sleeping, showering, living my daily routine, completely unaware that I was being documented. The final image showed me giving my statement to police officers, taken with a telephoto lens from deep in the forest. Someone had written on the back, "Every vacation has its memories, Rachel. Some are just more permanent than others, because some predators never abandon their territory. They just wait for the heat to die down, for new victims to book their perfect mountain retreats, for another chance to add to their collection." And somewhere in those Tennessee mountains, Marcus Raid is still out there, still watching vacation rental listings, still identifying women who think they found the perfect place to disappear. The only question is, when you book that isolated cabin for your next getaway, who's really planning the entertainment? The morning mist clung to the Kentucky ridges like cigarette smoke in a closed room, and I was adjusting my telephoto lens to capture a red-tailed hawk when I heard it. The deliberate snap of a branch breaking under human weight, followed by the soft scrape of boots on gravel. The sound came from directly behind the cabin, but when I spun around, camera still in hand, nothing moved except the gentle sway of pine boughs in the mountain breeze. The forest held that peculiar silence that follows when wildlife senses a predator nearby. I'm a wildlife photographer, trained to distinguish between natural forest sounds and human movement. After 15 years documenting endangered species across North America, I know when something doesn't belong. This wasn't a deer or black bear. This was someone deliberately trying to remain hidden. Someone who'd made one small mistake. The hair on my neck prickled as I scanned the tree line, every instinct screaming that I was being watched. Who was out there? And why were they studying me with such careful patience? My name is David Chen, and I'm a freelance nature photographer, specializing in Appalachian wildlife. 3 days ago, I'd rented this isolated cabin through a legitimate vacation rental site, drawn by its promise of 40 acres of pristine wilderness, and the kind of solitude that produces award-winning shots. The property sat at the end of a winding dirt road, accessible only by 4-wheel drive, perfect for documenting the region's rich biodiversity without human interference. The first 2 days had exceeded my expectations. I'd captured incredible footage of a family of red foxes, documented several rare bird species, and found evidence of a black bear population I was hoping to photograph. The cabin itself was rustic but well maintained, with a wide porch overlooking dense forest that stretched unbroken to the horizon. But this morning everything changed. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the cabin just as I was reviewing yesterday's shots on my laptop. When I opened the door, I found myself facing a family that looked like they'd stepped out of another century. The patriarch was a weathered man in his 60s, with pale blue eyes that held no warmth, flanked by 2 younger men who shared his suspicious gaze and lean, predatory build. Behind them stood a woman clutching a small child, both staring at me with open hostility. "You need to pack up and get out," the old man said without preamble, his Appalachian drawl carrying an undertone of absolute authority. "This here's our ancestral home. Been in our family since before the Civil War." I pulled out my rental agreement, trying to keep my voice reasonable. "I'm sorry, but I have a legal contract to stay here through Sunday. I paid in advance and..." "Government papers don't mean nothing to us," he interrupted, stepping closer to the door. "We don't recognize no outside authority on our land. You're trespassing. And outsiders ain't welcome in our territory. The way he emphasized territory sent ice through my veins. One of the younger men shifted, and I caught sight of a hunting knife on his belt, worn smooth from use. This wasn't about property disputes. There was something deeper and more dangerous in their demeanor. Look, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I don't want any trouble. But I have legal rights here. Maybe we can work something out. The old man's smile was thin and predatory. Rights? Only right you got is to leave before something unfortunate happens. These mountains don't take kindly to strangers poking around where they don't belong. After they melted back into the forest, I tried calling the rental company, but my phone showed no signal. The landline in the cabin was completely dead. Not just no dial tone, but silent, as if the wires had been cut. I was truly isolated now, with no way to contact the outside world. That night, they began their campaign of psychological warfare. I woke to the sound of footsteps circling the cabin, deliberate and methodical. Through the curtains, I caught glimpses of flashlight beams weaving the trees, sometimes pausing to point directly at windows where I stood watching. They wanted me to know they were there, wanted me to understand I was surrounded. The next morning brought their first message. On the front porch, positioned carefully on the welcome mat, lay a raccoon with its throat cut. The blood was still fresh, the metallic smell mixing with the pine-scented air in a way that made my stomach lurch. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a calculated psychological tactic designed to escalate my fear. I discovered they'd also sabotaged my generator, cutting the power lines with surgical precision. My car tires weren't slashed, but all the air had been let out. A message that I could leave if I wanted badly enough, but it wouldn't be easy. The second dead animal appeared that afternoon. A possum hung from the porch light, its body twisted in unnatural angles. Attached was a note in crude block letters, last warning. That evening, while exploring the property boundaries with my telephoto lens, I discovered why they were so desperate to keep outsiders away. Deep in the forest, partially hidden by camouflage netting, I found what looked like a small industrial complex. Multiple trailers connected by wooden walkways, sophisticated ventilation systems, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Even from a distance, the chemical smell was unmistakable. This was a massive methamphetamine production facility. I was documenting the operation when a hand grabbed my shoulder. The old man stood behind me, his face twisted with rage, while his sons flanked me with rifles. "Should have left when we asked nice," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Now you've seen too much." "I'm just a photographer," I said, trying not to let terror creep into my voice. "I don't care about your business. I'll leave right now and never mention this to anyone." "Can't take that chance," he replied. "This operation supplies half the state. Too much money at stake. We ain't letting some city boy with a camera shut us down." I realized then that the family had been using the rental property as both cover and early warning system, terrorizing visitors to ensure no one stayed long enough to discover their illegal activities. Most renters left after the first night of harassment, but I'd been stubborn enough to stay and unlucky enough to see too much. "You got two choices," the old man continued. "Disappear into these mountains permanent-like, or we stage a hiking accident. Either way, you ain't leaving to tell tales." In that moment, I made a desperate gamble. I triggered the emergency GPS beacon I always carry for wilderness photography, a device that sends distress signals to search and rescue services. The old man noticed the flashing light too late. "What did you do?" he snarled, raising his rifle. I bolted into the dense forest, crashing through underbrush as rifle shots cracked overhead. They weren't trying to kill me yet. They needed to know what kind of signal I'd sent and to whom. But I knew my head start wouldn't last long. I spent 18 hours hiding in the wilderness, moving constantly to avoid their search parties and their dogs. The forest that had seemed so beautiful became a nightmare maze of thorns and fallen logs, every shadow potentially hiding an armed pursuer. When the Kentucky State Police helicopter finally found me, I was hypothermic and delirious, but alive. The GPS beacon had triggered a multi-agency response that included the DA, who had been investigating reports of meth activity in the region for months. The raid uncovered one of the largest drug operations in Kentucky history. The Hutchins family had been running their lab for over a decade, using the rental property to monitor potential threats, including the DA. The DA had been investigating reports of meth activity in the region for months. The raid uncovered one of the largest drug operations in Kentucky history. The Hutchins family had been running their lab for over a decade, using the rental property to monitor potential threats, while maintaining the appearance of legitimate mountain folk. They terrorized dozens of visitors over the years, and several missing person cases were reopened as potential homicides. Ezra Hutchins and his sons were arrested and eventually sentenced to lengthy federal prison terms, but the experience left me fundamentally changed. I still photograph wildlife, but I'm hyper-aware now of how isolation can become a trap, how the beauty of remote places can hide dangers that have nothing to do with wild animals. The rental listing was permanently removed, but I sometimes wonder how many other perfect getaways are actually fronts for criminal operations. How many photographers, hikers, and nature lovers have stumbled into situations where their curiosity became a death sentence, because the most terrifying realization wasn't that criminals exist in remote places. It's that they've learned to weaponize our desire for authentic wilderness experiences. They understand that people like me seek out the most isolated locations, places where screams can't be heard and bodies might never be found. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm reviewing footage in my darkroom, I still hear that deliberate snap of a branch breaking under human weight. And I remember that somewhere in those Kentucky mountains, other families are probably watching other rental properties, waiting patiently for the next outsider who stays too long and sees too much.